Can a minion die on the cross for our sins? Did a Major League Baseball's recent Faith Night demonstrate a less divisive way to host the often controversial theme nights? And do we need more positive stories to balance out all the negative news? We talk about all this and more on this episode of Faith and Pop Culture. Hey, well, what's up, everyone? Welcome to episode number 24 of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined at the desk, as I always am, by the ping to my pong, Mr. Samuel David Camp. What is up?
Well, not too much, Daniel. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's I just got myself a cold tub. I don't know if you're familiar with the
like a polar plunge cold tub. Oh,
and I'm still working to how do you make enough ice to make it cold? But that wakes you up in the morning.
Wow, yeah.
I feel like I have extra energy. I'm like,
Oh, it definitely. I've heard good things about it. I've done a few cold plunges when I'm at the sea in cold weather, but I haven't done like an ice bath or anything.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've told my wife that we just can't keep frozen food in our house anymore, though, because I've completely taken over our freezer with like ice cubes and stuff for my.
You need a separate freezer, like a deep freezer now to have.
For the sake of health. But things are going good. Hey, we're excited you guys have joined us once again for what should be an interesting episode, some fascinating, quite bizarre topic for us to jump into. But before we jump into it, I did feel, to start off on a more serious note, the need to begin with somewhat of a confession, a public apology, something that has been eating me up since last week.
We'll get it off your chest.
I felt like because I sinned publicly, I should confess publicly. So if you guys tuned in last week, you'll remember that it was my week. I know for many of you, your favorite part of this podcast, where I could share things that I like. Mm-hmm. And I thought I'd step off the beaten path for a bit, talk about heavy metal, and shared the great German power metal band Sabaton, very war-themed. And I was like halfway home when it just the horror dawned on me when I realized that they are not German, that they are in fact from Sweden. I had been listening to Blind Guardian, which is another great progressive power metal band, and I feel like...
I left my hat of shame at home, Daniel. I'm so sorry.
I did bring with me, I thought I should surrender, I did bring my official metalhead card, and I feel like I need to pass that on to you.
I'm going to hold on to this for a little while.
Until such time as I am worthy as the fraud metalhead that I am.
I know. To be determined.
Hey, we here at this podcast value nothing if not...
Accountability,
accuracy.
You can depend on us for your very specific metal.
So I promise I will do better. Next week, when I get my chance, if I happen to talk about heavy metal from some European country, I will make sure I do better research and try and, again, there's a lot of European metal in my head. So keep it all straight.
It's hard. It's hard for someone who is such an aficionado to keep all of the...
When you have that much knowledge in one place,
It's difficult. It's almost like you need some sort of a external hard drive to put all that information on, so it frees you up to think about other things.
I do feel burdened sometime with that, but hey, I feel better now that I've got that off my chest.
Glad we could help.
But speaking of bizarre, weird things in the world to process, did you know, Sam, that
I don't know
that a minion did not in fact die on the cross for your sins?
You know, Daniel, that's something I've never contemplated before, and now that I have, I know that a minion in fact did not die on the cross for me.
There's more. Because I can tell you someone that did die on the cross for your sins. So this is one of the weirdest things that we've ever talked about here on the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. But it's been popping up everywhere. This is in different feeds and articles. And it is this bizarre kind of meme that has taken off mostly, almost predominantly on TikTok of sort of these Christian religious influencers that are giving a little religious spiel based on an image of a minion from the Despicable Me franchise. We all know the yellow, blue overalls, usually happy, but not this one, because this one is pinned up on a cross, sort of this cartoon animation, and proceeding to these influencers to give this spiel that again, they're all sort of following the same script. And hey, I even have the script. So here the what people seem to think is the original guy named John Pan on TikTok shows this image of this minion and says, so there was this animator, and he was messing around one day when he suddenly created a minion who died on the cross. And you can see he even put a nail through the three-fingered hand and even put a crown of thorns on the minion's head. But look, let me tell you something. A minion didn't die for you. A minion didn't pay the price of sin for you and me that we deserve. Hey, that we deserve, that's interesting. But Jesus did. Why? Because Jesus loves you. And if you think a minion died for you, then keep scrolling. But if you know that Jesus died for your sins, type wonderful savior and smash that subscribe button. So
this is just cringe on so many levels.
Yeah,
it's hard to,
in many ways,
it's hard to begin to deconstruct how awful this is.
Like in 24 episodes of this podcast, like all the worst things that we've sort of touched on, like, this kind of encapsulates all of them. But so that video, I got like tens of thousands of views, likes, comments. I don't know, people smashing that subscribe button, and kind of inspired. There's a bunch of like imitators, like there's a bunch, and they all follow like essentially the same script. So it's just even like more like eerie and like it's like this like cult of the minion almost. Like they're all sort of saying the same thing, and like so much so that like it's become this sort of phenomenon where like I found where I came across it because I'm not on TikTok is like Forbes magazine and like Rolling Stone like had these like deep dives trying to like dig into like what in the world is going on with where all of a sudden these TikTokers talking about Minion dying on the cross for our sins. And I thought we could get into it because on one hand...
Because why not?
Because, hey, if there was ever a faith and pop culture podcast story, this is probably it. But I think there's lots to it because like, on one hand, it's this bizarre, like weird, kind of TikTok culture, algorithm stuff. And I don't know, it's weird. But I feel like it also encapsulates just sort of, I don't know, some bigger questions as far as like, how do we in this kind of TikTok world, how do we share the gospel? How do we use culture to engage and, and is this one of those ways? And just sort of that tension, like, is this clever? Is it blasphemous? Is it harmful? Is it harmless? Is it, culturally relevant or is this completely culturally clueless? Were you, in fact, like I know you've already accepted Jesus as your Lord, but had you not, would this have swayed some of your...
Well, to be honest, it's funny that you say you saw this all over the place, whereas I did not see this until you brought it to my attention, which also goes to show how siloed I think the internet is. Like certain things do break through and cross over, but it's just funny. Like I'd never heard of this before until you brought it up.
And you still became a Christian.
And I still became a Christian. Yeah. So to me, it is very bizarre, perhaps borderline blasphemous, and I think more harmful than it is helpful. Sort of. That's maybe my take in a nutshell. And we can dive into why I think that.
And to be clear, this is the whole like Minion meme thing has been around since like Minion's been around. Like there's been, and even like Minion on the cross. Like I think where if you do the research in this and do the deep dive, as I sort of did,
which you have,
you can like trace it back. There was like a post, like 3 or 4 years ago, where someone had posted like a minion on this cross, like a natural, like outside, and there's like a stuffed animal or something, and they lit it on fire, and it was some weird post, and like that imagery, and it was sort of done like ironically and weird, and like just is this sort of weird dark sense of humor, and like from there, I think kind of inspired by that, some artist in like 2021 like made this 3D image of this minion on the cross, and it just sort of sat there dormant, I guess, for a couple of years, and
waiting for someone to discover it.
Which is, I think, the artist that these people are referring to when they say some 3D artist, just came up, like as though he's just like, wait a minute,
or like just like as if they're just kind of bumbling around on like ChatGPT, and like suddenly this image came out, unprompted, like. I don't think you just like fall into a minion on a...
I was trying to make a sunset and I ended up with a minion on the cross.
Yeah, I was just kind of messing around and then this popped up out of nowhere. It's like, I don't think that's how it works. But.
And it's hard to, again, I'm a millennial, so I'm not a Gen Z. And like my humor, knowing this I'm married to someone that teaches Gen Zs in high school, art teacher, like the humor is different. There is sort of this like sarcastic, kind of like ridiculous, sort of surrealist type of humor. That's
There's
sort
a lot of
there.
irony, I think.
And like a lot of this, I think, is playing off of,
Yeah.
of that in ways that like some of us that are, even a little bit older might not catch some of the like the in joke of it. But it's hard to tell with these videos because like even like I watched a bunch of them, and it's hard for me to even tell like, are these people for real? Like,
Yeah.
is this purely some like weird like wink wink nudge nudge, like we're all in on this weird joke, we're all doing these videos and it's about the Minion, isn't that kind of weird and kind of somewhat shocking, like, and I feel like there is some of that, but there
Yeah.
also seems to be some degree of like
Genuineness.
yeah, like of
Yeah.
people that are, hey, here's a way to, to sort of use this gimmick, this cultural thing that, as people scroll through, they see this weird, shocking image of a minion on the cross. And then it's essentially the like digital ages version of what we've always done as the church. Like, or
Yeah.
within the church of like, walking out to people and a picture of like, a skeleton burning in flames. Like, hey, do you want to go here when you die? Like, well, let me tell you about, my friend Jesus. Like, sort of that like attention catching thing.
Yeah.
To use that, and I feel like some, at least, of these creators are trying to do that. Of like, sort of here's the hook. We pull you
Yeah.
in with this weird thing, and then we tell you about Jesus. The question for me, again, if it's just sort of a weird joke thing, then that's just the internet, and that's what we got to deal with. But like, as far as like the more like, hey, this is a way to reach the world for Jesus. I don't know. Like, I feel like
Yeah. I
it
don't.
comes down to some of that like. Is all publicity good publicity? Like, is all good news good news? Like, is
Yeah.
the
No
fact that
news is
people are
bad
talking,
news.
like
Yeah.
Forbes magazine and stuff are talking about Jesus on a cross and a minion on a cross. Like, is that good in its own, regardless of like the weird path we took there, or is
Yeah.
there a sense that like this can actually like repel people from the church more than it?
Yeah, I think it causes more repulsion and confusion than any sort of like, maybe I will investigate deeper into what Christianity is and who this Jesus is. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what you have to look at when you are capitalizing on sort of trends online, like whether that's, I don't know, you see them every once in a while, whether it's certain audio on videos that like suddenly everybody's playing this audio and putting their own spins on it because it's like, it's what the algorithm wants and we all live to feed the algorithm. Or if it's, I mean, things like the ice bucket challenge or, anything that kind of crops up and like suddenly everybody's doing. Is it, I think you just have to think about what's the end result of like, okay, so you capitalize on this weird trend and then try and steer the conversation to Jesus. Are you actually doing that, or is it just you're just causing more confusion and you're really just trying to cash in on the attention economy that we live in now? And
Because you see that with the, like even these videos, it's not, and if you want to, because you know that a minion can't die for you. If you want Jesus, like, here's how. Go to this, like,
Yeah.
it's like, like the video, share it with your friends,
Yeah.
smash that subscribe. Like, there is this sort of attention.
It seems more about the attention and the growing of the individual's channel or, profile than it is about actually sharing.
Yeah, it's sort of gaming this system. And I think the thing that came to mind, which is not, I don't think in the same weight tier as the minions on the cross, but I think in the same conversation at least, is like the he gets us ads.
Yeah.
We talked about that. Might have been on our live streams before we did this podcast, but like I'm mixed on those and like veering more towards I don't like them than I like them. And it's some of that same conversation of like, I think there's some like theological issues and stuff with those. And I think there is sort of like a cheapening of religion, of Jesus, in order to, and like sort of that debate, though, people that don't agree with me on that is sort of, yeah, but lots of people are seeing these billboards. Lots of people are talking about these ads and about Jesus, and that should be a good thing. Like we want people talking about Jesus, and we do, but it's sort of like these minion things of like, but like, is all those conversations good? Like if they're talking about Jesus, but the Jesus that they have in front of them isn't really the Jesus that we find in the Bible.
Right.
Is that healthy, or is that actually
Is it actually
muddying
helpful?
the water in a way that
No, I think the way that you set the table sort of will kind of determine the conversation, I think, in some of these ways. And now I'm mixing metaphors, but, you know, when you start out with Minion as a crucified version of Christ, you're already kind of on a bad footing to like then steer the conversation in a positive way. And so I think that's why I'm a little more skeptical of this stuff being genuine. And maybe there are some people who think, hey, you know, talk about Jesus, period. It doesn't really matter theology, correctness, whether it's right or not. Like all that matters is that they talk about Jesus. And I think people can come at it from that angle, but I don't know that ultimately is going to be helpful for getting, like, you know, if what you want people to do is to be saved, I don't know that this is the way to get them there.
Yeah,
and I just think it adds confusion.
And I
to the
don't think
mix.
people want gimmicks right now. Like,
No.
I think though the algorithm might like some of these things, and you know, it might obscure the fact that so many people watch this video. It's obviously making a difference. Like, I feel like there's a lot to that, but I feel like because like one of my initial thoughts for this Minion thing is like it has very strong like youth group leader voice vibes of
and I think even the Forbes, was it the Forbes or the Vanity Fair article was. I feel like they maybe mentioned like this is sort of like your
because like you used to growing up, you know, like everyone out there is, you know, watching Game of Thrones, but like I'm going to tell you about the one that already won the battle for the throne of your heart, you know, like that, like this very contrived.
That's good, Daniel. I think you should.
Like there's that contrived, like, hey, here's this cultural thing.
I'm gonna smash
and we're
this
gonna
like
sort of
circle
like,
into this square.
We're gonna make it relevant to you know, and it's like
this has nothing to do with the sermon.
If you like Game of Thrones, like then you're gonna like you know, the next 30-second sermon. So turn to First Peter. You know, it's like no, like there's this thing that just a cheapening, which is what I
there's a
I don't know. I feel like there's a place for humor and all that kind of stuff, but there's a cheapening when you make it such a little gimmick and it's this real cutesy, and it's like, I don't know if we're presenting the right image of Jesus. But hey, let us know if you guys are as perpetually online as I am and you come across this, or if maybe you're more like Sam and blissfully unaware of the poor Minion that apparently died on the cross for no reason, because he's not dying for anyone's sins. He's just full on.
I think it was a faked image to begin with. So.
Oh, okay, well, I feel better now. That no real minions were hurt in the creation of this picture. But speaking of divisive things that make people angry and people don't know what to do with, we have the kind of themed events at sports games. Because this has been a controversial thing we've talked about, again, I think previous iteration of the podcast. We talked about like Pride nights, like because there was a whole bunch of kerfuffle in the NHL, the hockey league, where eventually it's kind of the first league where teams were like, you know what? We don't need to have a Pride night. Some of our players are uncomfortable. It kind of puts them on the spot to like wear the rainbow tape, and like, you know, if they don't agree with that, like it just, you know, there's this players didn't want to be part of that, and if they backed out, then they felt like they're gonna, you know,
it's a bit too
join the
politically charged.
Like, like there's just so much of like people are gonna be mad, so they stop doing that, and it just became this whole debate, and like other people kind of dug their toes in, and like that's why we need them, because people are still so against it, and like it just became this conversation. But kind of lost in the shuffle of some of that. And because some of the response is sort of like, why are we, you know, focusing on this group? Like, why don't we have family night? Or why don't we have like Christian night or church night? And like some of these things, like sort of how unfair it was. And kind of lost in the shuffle is that like, there are those nights. There are some of those. So there was a recent one, kind of the most recent one a week ago. The Baltimore Orioles, who are one of the favorites to win the World Series this year, good team.
Who knew?
They hosted their own faith night, and it just got a lot of attention. They're not the only team, as we'll see, that have some of these type events, but they're the most recent. For whatever reason, I think because some of their players are like really good and that were speaking out, it just a lot of more people were talking about this. And there's several things to this, because the night itself, I think it's notable, as we can get into, is like it was a thing that happened like with the game, but not during the game. As far as I know, there might have been stuff like, I don't know, maybe they played like worship songs or something. I didn't see all that like in the thing, but like for the most part, this is like, I'm guessing like an afternoon game. They had the game, and then like if you have tickets, you could stay. And like the coach, some of their star players came out. They had a band, some like non-denominational worship band came and sang, and like they kind of had like a little worship service. The players shared their testimonies, and like I think they had like 6,000 people or something that like stayed and kind of like had a little church service essentially.
Yeah.
After the game, so again, a little different than some of the way that like the Pride nights have gone, and even like, looking to some of like the history of these, because again, like, there's this narrative that like our culture only focuses on like the Pride event or this event or that event.
Right,
And
right.
they just completely neglect people of faith, which hasn't been true because there's been faith or what used to be sort of like interfaith nights dating back in baseball to like the 60s. And just sort of the numbers, like last year, 29 of the 30 teams hosted a Pride night. I think the one exception is the defending champion, Texas Rangers, whereas 18 of 30 teams hosted a faith night. So again, not as many had some kind of faith night, but like still over half the league
Yeah.
had a night specifically for, again, like, they're usually titled like faith night, like sort of broadly, but like they're essentially like kind of
Leans
evangelical, like
Christian.
yeah, like it's
Yeah.
very and it's the more evangelical, not even like the Catholic. It's not really openly kind of interfaith night, but I think there's several things to this. 'Cause I think I think it does expose maybe some like double. There's some of the, I don't know, like we don't like theme nights, but we like this one. Like there's some of that of like we don't want to sort of just why can't we just leave it to baseball? Just let them play baseball. Like the shortstop's going to share about Jesus. Like this is the best thing that's happened all month. Like there's some of that
Which we saw, like, not to bring it back to the Olympics, but we saw a lot of that at the Olympics. It was like, I'm boycotting the Olympics, except for that runner, and she was so like bold in her faith, and we need more of that. And it's like, okay, like you want more of it, or you want to boycott it. Like that's sort of the two.
And even just like there's a lot of anger about there's the Pride nights, there's not faith nights. Then there is faith nights, and then like everyone's like, okay, and they move on to be mad about something else. Like
Right.
it's like, did you really just want that, or were you just mad at this? Like
Yeah.
so there's some of that, but I think just sort of in general, I think why these events have become controversial is because they're messy. Like I think there isn't agreement as far as like, can you even do these in a way that's like healthy and promotes unity or understanding the community, or like by nature are they just going to be divisive, politically charged things? And I think maybe a side point we can get into is this sort of like, I think how they did this one might be a template for a better way. But what are some of your initial thoughts for this?
Yeah, I think how they did it is certainly, I think perhaps a template for just theme nights going forward. And I think the thing about it is when you do theme nights on things that are already quite controversial, like Pride nights or faith nights, or I don't know, I'm sure they don't do like openly political nights, but I think things that are more like social issues, I think you're already kind of stepping into hot water there. And so I think the way that you do it, I think there's a good way to do it and a bad way to do it. And I think we've seen, like with the Pride night, it seems like a very sort of forced acceptance of this way of life or of these values or what have you. And I think that's where we saw the pushback from like the NHL players last year. And I don't think that's a great way to go about it, regardless of whatever the theme is. And so I think making theme nights more of a background and optional thing, and I think maybe doing something special for that theme, after the game, I think would be a perfectly acceptable way. But I think what people would likely have problems with is like, okay, you did faith night, but it wasn't like everyone had to wear, a crucifix or, a fish on their armband or something to like, show solidarity for those of faith. Whereas if it's like a Pride night, like everyone's kind of expected to wear the rainbow or do the thing to show that you're not a bigot or whatever. And so I think the way in which they do these theme nights, I think is going to be more important than either they just stop doing them altogether or find some sort of a consistent way to
Yeah, because I think
host them.
maybe some of the motivation. I think one difference too, why it's not necessarily like apples to apples. Like I think it's close. Like is that there is this like, obviously like by definition like something sexual about Pride Night like
Yeah.
that and like which whatever but like the like I know it's uncomfortable for like like if I'm a dad bringing my kids, it's not just hey I don't
Right.
agree with this lifestyle ideology. There's also just my kid's like 8 and I don't necessarily want to just have a bunch of people like where the focus is so overtly
Yeah.
sexual
Yeah.
in the same way that like other like military night or faith night or things like you might not agree with all the implications of some of that but it's at least not like I guess like sexually charged or like
Yeah.
it's not
It's not as maybe not as intrusive.
so yeah so I think there is a difference in that but I think you're right I think some of the like why this the way they did this faith night is maybe different is I feel like a lot of the pride nights which is why so many of the players had an issue with it is like they almost seem like I mean like almost like indoctrinate like it's
Yeah.
this isn't just like to show that hey there's a place baseball is for everyone or hockey's for everyone like if you're this if you believe this faith if you have if you're gay if you're this or this race or have cultural history like there's a place for you in the game and like that's like I feel like that's what those events are supposed to be is sort of like hey we just celebrate we're all different but we all love baseball and like we're gonna show some of that. It's just the problem with some of the way that like, the Pride Nights have gone is it's not that. It's not just
Yeah.
saying if that's you, like there's a place for you here. It's like if that's you, like come and like everyone here, we're all gonna be watching and like we're all gonna fall in line. And if you don't, like whoo, like those reporters, like with the hockey, it's
Yeah.
like they were telling the whatever the Russian guy like that didn't want to play like go back and fight in the war, and it's like
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Like because he didn't want to like come out like with wear the jersey and like they just attacked him and like because he didn't fall in line like
Right.
and I feel like something like where the faith one seems like it's a little different is I think like I wasn't at the baseball games like maybe it was more forceful than it seems from what I read but like it seemed more like hey like there's lots of us here that don't know each other but we love baseball and we also love Jesus and like we're gonna give you a chance and here some of our players love Jesus and like
Yeah.
but it wasn't like every player came out and like had to stand there and you have some like atheist or like more Muslims player or something like standing there having to pretend to love Jesus like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like hey the players that want to share come share that no one's being forced to like the fans that want to come if you don't go home beat the rush like there's it's just sort of
Yeah.
to celebrate an openness and I feel like there is some value to something like that like I don't know like I don't necessarily need I love the San Francisco Giants like I don't necessarily need them to like
Affirm your faith.
affirm my faith
Yeah.
in order to enjoy the baseball game like I feel like my faith is already affirmed in like other places like so it doesn't necessarily interest me in the same way but like hey for some people it does mean hey maybe if my kids are watching and their favorite player wants to go there is value in some of that I guess
Yeah.
but I do think it can be done it seems
Yeah.
it's just sort of if humans will get in the way of or not of like just sort of making it political and I do think there is a sense of like if we are going to support this then like I mean not everything goes but we can't necessarily just sort of like
Yeah.
stick to baseball unless you're talking about Jesus like
Right.
I think that's I don't know there's some double standards there that
Yeah.
it's like but I do think we can say hey there's a way to do it that can just sort of be a gather with other people like you sort of embrace this share this mutual thing that you have in common and baseball together like in a way that's not like come here and we're gonna like
Yeah.
convert you to our ideology but again let us know what you think of that or maybe if you've ever attended one of those faith nights I know I believe we live in Atlanta and our Atlanta Braves I think they are one of the teams that does host a faith night every season. I've never gone but so if you have attended one of those, maybe, hey, let us know what you thought. Send us a message, comment in the comment section below. But another thing I wanted to share with you guys is that we actually had the chance to, or I had the chance to interview Jonathan Lim, who is the producer of the movie that just came out, family-friendly movie about a penguin, My Penguin Friend. It's a cute movie. He's like the producer as well as like the founder of City Hill Arts kind of production studio. They're making a bunch of like he would say, it's not necessarily like a they don't like a Christian studio, although like the name itself is inspired by scripture, and they're making kind of faith-friendly, just inspiring stories of kind of human nature. And it's a good conversation. I really enjoy it. I've been able to interview several people, and I don't know, I enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah, it was a great conversation.
So I thought we'd play just a very short snippet where I just sort of asked him about his vision as a studio, like why tell these like feel-good, inspirational stories of like, human nature, kind of what is the value of some of that. So we're going to play his answer to that now.
I think those, in this news cycle, negative news rises to the top and it sells. But I think we need more positive news to balance things out. And the positive stories of hope and triumph and friendship and love and kindness and compassion, they're everywhere if we look for them. And so, we're just one of many storytellers, but we would love to be able to focus on the positive. And so, we have a number of movies that have different themes to them, but they are all united by this unity and what unites us as human beings, and stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, whether they're based on true stories or inspired by true stories, like My Penguin Friend, which is inspired by a true story of a Brazilian fisherman that came across this Argentinian penguin covered in oil. He nursed him back to health, and they bonded. They forged this unbelievable bond where for 8 years straight, the penguin swam thousands of miles to go visit his fisherman friend. And that went viral on social media in 2016. And so, the world learned about that, but now being able to capture that in this beautiful cinematic story is really a dream come true.
So yeah, I encourage you guys. We'll link the full conversation. It's like a 20-minute conversation we had with Jonathan below. But check it out. If you didn't check out the movie My Penguin Friend, I think it's still in theaters. So hey, bring your kids, go see some cute penguins. But speaking of things you can see in theaters, things that are perhaps out now, and even things that are coming soon, we have the next segment of this podcast. So there were two movies that I checked out and reviewed last week. The first one being My Penguin Friend. Again, feel-good movie. If you like animals and just inspirational stories of, human nature struggling against life and trials. And hey.
Check that out. But another one that is about the human struggle in a very different way.
Struggling against creature, feature, alien, Romulus. I like this movie. I think I'm an alien guy. I like aliens. I like creatures. It's like my monster movies are my jam. Jaws is my favorite movie. Aliens like Jaws in space, so it's like one of my favorite movies. And this movie's fine. In many ways, it's like just like putting all the alien movie stuff in a blender, and like even like dialogue and stuff is like word for word what's from other movies, and it's very much like a kind of like a Force Awakens of like, hey, here's all the stuff you like, and it's sort of all repackaged. And
would you say it's the best sequel so far in the Alien franchise?
It'd be the first two are good. Like the original Ridley Scott's is good, perfect horror movie. James Cameron made Aliens, plural, and it's a lot of people love it more than the first. It's like an action movie. It's not even a horror movie. It's exciting, but it's very much as like a product of its like, sort of that like late 80s, early 90s type action movies. But hey, it's good. Everything else has been terrible though. So this is definitely probably after those two movies. But so hey, if you're not scared of aliens and not too squeamish with a bit of blood and carnage, you can check that out. Yeah. But a movie that probably doesn't offer a whole lot of blood and carnage. Kind of the movie coming out this week is we got a faith-based film. We got The Forge, the Kendrick brothers who, in many ways, like I know there's been faith-based stuff for a long time, but they almost got some of this started. Like at least in like the mainstream. Like there's been Christian movies, for a long time, but like with their movies like Facing the Giants and Courageous and Fireproof, like they were sort of the first one, maybe outside of Mel Gibson's Passion, that like became like box office successes of like, hey, this isn't just like what you find at your Christian bookstore or on the shelf, and it's like, oh, it's
straight,
safe for the kids,
straight to home video.
It's like, hey, it's like an actual movie, and you go and it makes money, and it does like what movies are supposed to do. So they have the new movie coming out, and I will be attending the world premiere. I'll be walking the red carpet.
Nice, look at you,
looking all snazzy, attending this on Thursday and probably get to meet the Kendrick brothers and some of the actors and stuff that are there. So that'll be kind of fun. And I'll actually see, I have the screener link for this movie already. So I should have the review out before the weekend. And I don't know, I'll admit, it'll be fun to go to the premiere. I always cheer for movies made from faith. These types of movies don't always do it for me. I don't know, and maybe after I see it, we can get into some of it more, but I kind of more the Sunday school lesson in a movie theater vibe. You know, like, I think the movie itself sort of about like a kid that gets discipled in the church, and like, hey, I'm all for discipleship in the church.
Yeah.
I just don't necessarily know if
Approve the message, perhaps the medium leaves something
I
to
don't
be
know.
desired.
It doesn't necessarily strike me as like a story that needs to be told on the big screen. But maybe I will enjoy it a lot. I'm cheering for it. But again, stay tuned. This week we'll have my review, and also I can report live, no, maybe not live, but from the red carpet. But something you don't even need to wait for, although, hey, I would be happy to walk the red carpet for this. We have the final segment of this episode, which is things we like that you should like too.
Well, speaking of movies, Daniel, my wife and I recently watched a movie together, which we don't do often. Usually it's just British gardening TV that we like to consume on our free time. But, and we didn't go to the theater for this, although it was, I think, a limited release. It's Young Woman and the Sea, starring Daisy Ridley. It is on, for all of our hate that we give to Disney and all of our eye rolling that we have stored up for the things that Disney does. This was actually a really good movie. It is one of those sort of heartwarming triumph of the human spirit, and just it's based on a true story, and the first woman to swim the English Channel, which I had never heard of her, and it's a really fascinating film and a really good movie to check out. Have you seen Young Woman in the Sea?
I haven't seen it, but I've heard from like multiple, like you were saying it was great.
Yeah.
My brother, who typically hates a lot of movies and is sort of one of those, like, there's no, it's all just a bunch of junk these days. He texted me, he's like, hey, I saw this movie, it's really good. And I wish I saw it. I don't know why they did. It was like a very limited release.
I think we had talked about it when I saw trailers for it. I was like, oh, this would be a good movie to review, but it was, it just wasn't in
like
very
the closest one that
theaters.
was theater that was playing for me was like on the other side of the city, and I just didn't feel like driving to the other side of the city, and so I haven't seen it, and then I rarely get to go back, and I'm usually watching new stuff to review that, unless it's rewatching Lord of the Rings extended for the first time. Like, I don't often watch movies again, so I just haven't gone back. But
well, I think to me it represents something that I think often gets overlooked, and we talk about it some on here, but the fact that there are good movies coming out of Disney, and I mean, like, we know that, but it, we like to dunk on Disney a lot, I think, and I think it's kind of the thing to do these days, and everyone just kind of hates all the new Star Wars stuff and blah blah blah, and they have the fifth installment of whatever franchise that they're capitalizing on, and we can give them a hard time for that, but I think when they do make a movie that's good, it's an original story. It's not a sequel or a prequel or anything like that. I mean, I think we should be excited about that and support those kind of movies.
Yeah, and I think it says something too, just about like the sort of like, it's unfortunate that there's not more of a place for those sort of movies. Like, like I feel like there is something to be said that there's so much of these like big Marvel movies or big whatever sequels or what, these big blockbusters and stuff that just fill up the release calendar, where it's a lot of these studios like don't necessarily have a place for here's sort of this like low-key human drama story. It's not gonna be this like make $1 billion to the movie theater, but it's a good story. Like, a lot of those have been getting dumped on more like, maybe they'll put it out there just to like qualify for awards or something, but like then they just sort of dump it on streaming and like whatever, you can still see it on stream. It's not like it's not there, but we've sort of lost, like, there just isn't a lot of those sort of movies that are as like widely accessible. But hey, maybe I got 2 thumbs up from 2 different people, so maybe I'll
put it on your list. At some point, it's there.
inspire me to maybe take up some swimming. But hey, we're excited that you have joined us once again. Again, talking about some fun stuff, some weird stuff, and just as Christians, look at the culture, the good, the bad, the ugly, and say, hey, how do we join this? How do we have conversations about this? So we love to do that every week, and glad that you have chosen to join us. And that being said, we hope we will see you next Thursday, every Thursday, for more conversations on faith and pop culture.